One. And welcome everybody to another Smart Money Circle show. I'm Adam SArhan. With me today is Jonathan Awde, who serves as president, CEO, and officer at Dakota Gold. Ticker symbol is DC. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
So Jonathan, I always like to begin. Can you tell us a little about yourself and how you got to where you are today, please?
Sure. So my background is capital markets and finance, double major in economics and finance, and I spent over 20 years in the mining industry. Had 3.5 years at a brokerage firm in Vancouver that really had a historical presence in financing small cap metals and mining. In 2010, I founded a company called Gold Standard Ventures, which was recently just acquired by Orla Mining. It's got an oxide heap leach project in Nevada. And then in late 2020, early 2021, co-founded Dakota Gold Corp with Bob Quartermain, mining legend, and Jerry Aberley. And we are a NYSE listed company with a very specific focus on revitalizing the Homestake district in Leeds, South Dakota.
Beautiful. Well, that's a great story. Thank you so much for sharing it. I love the transition from capital markets or traditional finance to gold specifically. Just out of curiosity, what led you to gold and not somewhere else?
Well, so I've always actually had an interest in collecting coins and cards, like hockey cards, baseball, football, basketball. So that's where I've always kind of parked some money, and it's more of a hobby where I've always, when I was starting out in my career, I didn't have a lot of money. I would buy, a half-ounce coin or a 1-ounce coin. But I do believe in having, some kind of insurance. And, I've always felt very strongly that gold is a good store of value. And, when you look at what's happening in the world right now with, debt situations and governments not able to balance budgets when you're at or near full employment, really interesting, and I think every portfolio should have some exposure to gold.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree with you more. I just read somewhere, hold on, let me show it to you, to your point. It said it's been 60 hours since the US debt crossed 33 trillion, and it's already up another 50 billion with a B. That means we've added $833 million in debt per hour since the US debt crossed 33 trillion. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. So I'm a big fan of gold as well, but go ahead if you
It is. And when you look at what's happened with interest rates, it's the fastest tightening cycle in almost 50 years. And now the US, just to service its debt, has crossed through $1 trillion a year just to service its debt. So if we do go into a soft landing, or God forbid we go into a hard landing, and rates are still at these levels, you could be spending upwards of $1.5 trillion annually just to service your debt. So at some point, that's going to need to rectify itself. And you're seeing this major shift away from gold being owned in the West to the East. You're seeing record central bank buying in China and India. And, you're seeing these countries say, you know what, we're not going to buy US treasuries anymore. And there's been this shift away from settling transactions in the US dollar, even though the US dollar will still be the world's reserve currency for several decades, but you'll see a gradual erosion of transactions settled in US dollars.
Yeah, and then it replaces with gold and other things. That's what you're saying, correct? Yeah. Okay, beautiful. So let's talk about Dakota again. Let's talk about some specific competitive advantages. I know that you're still, tell people if you can, early stages, you're in developmental phase, the exploration phase. Please speak to tell us about Dakota, please.
Sure. So the Homestake mine in Leeds, South Dakota is still to this day the largest single gold mine in the history of the US. So 40 million ounces of gold came out of this mine. And so when we put this company together, we merged with a company called Dakota Territory Resource Corp. That was a public company that had a small land package about 4.5 to 5 miles north of the old mine. But what it had was the last mine manager, the vice president of exploration. So you had this local knowledge and expertise that just didn't really have access to capital. Mm-hmm. So we saw an opportunity to merge with this public company but then also to grow the land package significantly from about 5,000 acres to almost 50,000 acres. And very importantly, we have 14,000 acres of our 50,000 acre land package that's on private ground. So from a permitting standpoint, permitting on private ground is by far the most advantageous from a timing perspective, because you're seeing now on US Forest Service or BLM, where you have to involve the federal government, where getting a permit can take 5, 6, 7 years. So having a private land or having a project that has a grandfather permit that requires a simple amendment puts you in a much stronger position than others who are on US Forest Service or BLM.
I love that. And then from a valuation standpoint, our research, hence us connecting, was you guys are extremely undervalued. You've got a tremendous amount of room for growth. Let's say fast forward, if you can, 5 years or 10 years, things hit. Even at current gold prices, forget the fact that gold is extremely undervalued as well and likely to go higher. Can you talk to us about potential or what could happen or what could unfold?
Sure. So we completed the merger on April 5th of 2022. We changed the name from Dakota Territory Resource Corp to Dakota Gold Corp, uplisted to the NYSE American, because we felt this opportunity was befitting of a full-blown US listing. And when we started drilling last year, our number one objective was, proof of concept. We wanted to prove to the market that there was mineralized homestake formation along this corridor. Our Maitland project, which was the first transaction we did from Barrick, is contiguous with the old mine. And we did that. And then we made two very key discoveries at our Maitland project, which again is contiguous with the old homestake mine. So we've discovered this zone that we call the JB zone, which is in mineralized homestake formation. So the same host to what homestake was mining for 125 years.
Wow.
And similar grades. But I think potentially as interesting or more interesting, we found a new discovery, a second discovery in a different rock type that typically sits much shallower and closer to surface. And we called that the Unionville zone, which was actually the original name of that claim in 1876. Wow. So with every drill hole we drill at our Maitland project, we have an opportunity to hit both kinds of mineralization, which is fantastic. And again, Maitland is on private ground, and it's contiguous with this 40 million ounce generational ore.
And then what about the cost of the gold coming out per ounce? What does that look like? Because I know with oil, a lot of big talk is it costs them $30, $50, $20, whatever it is. How does that work with gold?
So right now we're still in the exploration development phase, but this was an iconic gold mine that produced for 125 years. So from 1990 to 2000, when gold was that sub $300, really challenging time for the gold industry, they kept chasing this ore body down below 8,000 feet. So they ultimately decided to shut the mine down in 1996. The last production came in 2001. And, it basically sat. So Barrick, the second largest gold mining company in the world, bought homestake mining in 2001. The transaction closed in 2002. And right away it went into Barrick's closure group. So we bought these assets from Barrick out of their closure group. And this will be the third transaction in the last 5 years that Barrick has done out of the closure group under the newly combined Randgold Barrick, led by Mark Bristow, with the other two companies being Skeena and K92. Skeena is just under $1 billion, and K92 is about 1.5 billion. And again, just having the opportunity to somewhat control your own destiny by having private ground, in a previously disturbed, area, historical, mining, community, is hugely advantageous.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. From a dollar standpoint, you're talking about a rough estimates, not you specifically, industry-wide, to mine out of the ground. What are the norms? Is it half of where it's trading? Is it a third? Is it at what it's trading? Just so investors understand the margins and the potential for growth there.
So I would say the companies with high margin assets in the lowest quartile would be, sub $900 what's called ASIC, so all in sustaining cash costs.
Got
So
it.
that's sort of the creme de la creme. So you've got $1,000 margin with best deposits. Some of the higher margin assets are in that $1,400 to $1,500. So you still have say a 20% margin, which is not bad.
Yeah, for sure.
But this was a high grade mine, and it's a very like contiguous ore body. So once you get into it, it's then a function of following it north, south, east, or west. And that's kind of really what we're doing now. We made this discovery. We're utilizing what's called directional drilling. So we'll have much tighter spacing. But again, with every hole we drill on our Maitland project, we have an opportunity to hit this tertiary epithermal discovery.
Understood.
And then homestake formation underneath it, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and that gold is trading above 1,900 an ounce. So you're talking about just big money there. That makes perfect sense. Thank you for that. So let's shift the conversation a little bit and talk about some timeless lessons you've learned along the way. You come from finance background, investing. You're also CEO of a publicly traded company. You've done M&A, mergers and acquisitions. You've bought something. I'm interested to see what you have to share with us, please.
Yeah. So as you know, this is a very cyclical business, right? So the time to buy assets is when everybody wants to sell them. But that's also the most challenging time to raise capital because it can be, your cost of capital can be more expensive. So one of the lessons that I learned very early on was one of the reasons why a lot of companies fail in this industry is being undercapitalized. And that's a lesson you can apply to almost any industry.
100%.
And, so I was involved with a company earlier on in my career that ran into some financial difficulties. And the company was in a heap of financial trouble. And that's where that lesson of being, almost overly capitalized, because the mining industry, things, kind of take longer, they cost more, and you just don't know what can happen. Right. And so being caught flat-footed and undercapitalized, again, is something that when I got into running Gold Standard and then Dakota Gold, I always wanted to be in a strong financial position relative to my entire peer group. And we are in that category today. And also aligning yourself with the right people. I was very fortunate enough to have met Bob Quartermain back in 2010. So Bob was founder, president, CEO of Silver Standard, which he grew from $2.5 million to $2.5 billion. He left in 2010. It's currently a $4 billion company. And then one of the more impressive things that you'll see anywhere in the world in the mining industry is 2010-11, Bob acquired an asset called Brucejack from Silver Standard, formed a company called Pretium, and from acquisition to discovery to gold pour in under 7 years. Wow. And Newmont came in and bought Newcrest, but Newcrest bought this Pretium for $3.5 billion. Mm-hmm. So having an opportunity to learn with and partner with someone like Bob Quartermain, who's one of our co-chairs, and our largest shareholder is fantastic. And just surrounding yourself with the right people. Yeah. And because I'm not a geologist or a mining engineer, surrounding yourself with people who let the data do the talking and don't get influenced by bankers and just tell you the truth. There's a lot of promotion. There's a lot of arm wave. There's a lot of trying to make an asset work where it shouldn't. And that's where I think Bob's one of his principles is just, if you test a target and it's not there, why do you keep drilling? Yeah. So being aligned with shareholders, having skin in the game, there's far too many management teams that don't have any money at risk. Mm-hmm. So I think management of Dakota owns over 25% of the company. Mm-hmm. And we've got two phenomenal co-chairs in Bob Quartermain and Steve O'Rourke. So Steve actually, equally as impressive, he ran global exploration for BHP, where he had annual budgets for petroleum, annual budgets that were in the billions. Wow. So you've got this large commercial expertise, you've got M&A, capital markets. So two excellent resources to have at my fingertips. So very blessed to have them involved. And just understanding that this is a long-term business. And you have to understand how to navigate cycles. But when you're buying assets, is really, really important. So having capital, having people who will support you in addition to your own capital you're going to put in is really, really important.
I love that. That's really, really powerful. And what about some timeless mistakes you've made and or seen other people make, and how do you avoid them besides being undercapitalized? Because that's happened to me and countless others. And the fact that you've been able to come through that, by the way, I'm still standing like Elton John song. That's what I love that. So by all means.
So someone asked me the other day, all right, if you were to go back in time for, a mistake that you would eat and own for Gold Standard, what would it be? So we made 3 discoveries at our land package in the Carlin Trend in Nevada for Gold Standard, and we had an opportunity to buy water rights. Back in late 2015, early 16, we'd just gotten into this new oxide discovery that was exciting, and I had a budget from my board of I think up to $4 million, maybe a 3.5 or $4 million. And so we're negotiating for these water rights, and this guy wanted $10 million,
Oh my gosh.
and just couldn't get there. And I think I convinced the board maybe get me to 6, but then I went to 6, he went to 12.
Yeah, okay.
And now the company that acquired Gold Standard Ventures is a multi-billion-dollar company, phenomenal operators. They built a mine during COVID, on time, under budget, and they're still looking for to secure the water rights, and it'll be likely several times what we were looking at. But again, big company, they can afford it. So I think just with things like that you need, I shouldn't have wasted time. But at the time, I think we had $25 million in the bank, so it would have been a significant portion of our cash. They weren't willing to take shares. So understanding those kinds of key items that you need to permit and build a mine, don't waste time, just do it.
Smart, yeah. So the KPIs, like the key metric that you need to look at, if it's necessary, just hit it and do it, and then move forward. Yeah.
Because in some jurisdictions, sometimes the water is worth as much or more than the gold, right?
Right.
So that was a key lesson for me. And just the more I get involved in this industry, there's so many key parts of what makes something successful. And when you're looking at exploration, again, I talked about being capitalized, understanding, again, particularly if you're in the US or in Canada, there's First Nations, Native American issues, you have to understand what that looks like. And again, because this is a very long-term business, you don't want to make it longer by taking on unnecessary permitting risk.
Right.
So I think, staying away from, especially in the States, staying away from areas where there's proximity to water. I think when you look at dealing with federal lands close to water, it's almost becoming a no-fly zone. And that's why South Dakota is such a great place to be. I mean, this is a really significant, gold area, one of the largest concentrations of gold anywhere on the planet. So it's people, it's capital, it's jurisdiction, land tenure, permitting, and with ESG now, it's if you don't have strong community ties, great reputation in the community, you're not going to get a social license to operate. So I think ESG is really, really important for any jurisdiction. But obviously having a bias, particularly in the US.
I love that. That's really, really powerful. What about leadership? Let's shift gears and talk about leadership. What makes a great leader, and what are some lessons you've learned about leadership that you'd like to share with the audience, please?
Well, hiring really, really smart people and not micromanaging. Making sure that your overall strategy and the strategic outcomes you're looking to achieve, you're all aligned. But I mean, you look at someone like James Berry, who's our Vice President of Exploration. James is an ore finder. James has found gold everywhere he's gone. James was Vice President of Exploration for a company called Remarkable Minerals that did sort of a similar thing in South Carolina. And that was bought by Oceana Gold for almost $1 billion. So, James and I will talk almost every day. Jerry Aberle was the last mine manager when the mine shut down.
Gotcha.
So this is someone who understands, how to develop something in this district as good or better than anyone on the planet.
Right.
I brought over Patrick Malone from Barrick, who was running their closure group, to, be our chief sustainability officer. So this is an environmental lawyer who understands how to navigate and liaise with different state and federal agencies. Just a wonderful resource. And then having 2 co-chairs like Bob and Quartermain and Steve O'Rourke, they both put the shareholder first. It's imperative for them to look at, is this the best allocation of our resources?
Mhm.
And are we aligned with our shareholders? Because if you do those things,
Yeah.
over time, these are magnifiers.
Yeah.
But just hiring amazing people, making sure that you're aligned, and not micromanage. And a book that I read that really helped change the way I look at how to run a company or how to run my life, because I'm married with 4 kids,
Yeah.
was a book called The Principles by Ray Dalio.
Oh, I love that book. It's
And
one of my favorites. Oh my Lord. Yeah.
and it's about radical truth, radical transparency, but also meritocracy. So
Right.
just because I'm the CEO and a big shareholder, or Jerry or Bob, sometimes there's always a more efficient way or a better way to do things. And then just being able to tell someone, hey, I disagree with you for these reasons. You talk, you work through it, and you move on, and you don't get all sensitive and this entitlement. And there's a lot of that in the world today.
100%.
So I think being able to have a transparent discussion with someone, for the greater good of the company,
Right.
I think is something that, that's certainly principles that I live by. And then just cost of capital in the mining industry needs to come down.
Mhm.
So we're really focused on that, because for example, we did a $50 million financing 2 years ago. We chose not to pay a commission, and that saved the company $2.5 million.
Wow. Oh, that makes perfect sense. I love principles. It's one of my favorite. I always tell people the best idea wins, right? So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it comes from the janitor, if it comes from the moon. It just, what's the best idea and let's run with it. I love that.
And ultimately in the mining, industry, but particularly the exploration and development. So there's a constant competition for capital. So if
Yeah.
you've got 10 targets,
Right.
you might not be able to drill all 10 targets. So you have
Right.
to, be extremely disciplined
Mhm.
and allocate your capital to where you're having success.
Right.
And if you're not having success, well, make some adjustments and move on. And that's okay.
Mhm.
But sometimes people get married to an idea and they keep chasing it and pushing it. And that's what makes some people great. But sometimes, in my opinion, the great explorers or the great mine builders are able to they know when to vector and when to stop.
Yep.
And when to keep pushing and when to stop.
Mhm. So I love that. Okay, beautiful. Let's talk about adversity and some obstacles. How do you handle adversity, and what are some obstacles that you had to overcome that you'd like to share with the audience?
Look, I think when it comes to adversity, I sort of take it head on. I kind of think I thrive in it. I think in the past, I would say that I wouldn't have gone at it head on. But I think, again, you do this long enough and you kind of, you really understand these cycles and money flowing in, money flowing out. And just that whole, sometimes we don't listen to those little voices, or when that, intuitive side of you is saying we shouldn't do this or we should do more of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and again, I talked to you about that company I was involved with early in my career that ran into money problems, and
Yep.
it did so because there's a principal in the company that didn't want to take a financing that was deemed to be expensive, but it would have been a lifeline that would have got them over the line.
Mhm. No, I love that. Okay, beautiful. So what you're saying with adversity is just tackle it, like deal with it, lean into it, opposed to putting your head in the sand, and then it just compounds and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Final question for you. What's the best piece of advice you'd like to share with the audience, or give your 30-year-old self?
Be your true, authentic self.
Mhm.
I love what I do, so I don't really consider it work, although my wife and my children do. But constantly be learning, constantly be growing. Surround yourself with amazing people who have had success, and or have learned from failures. But just be your true, authentic self, and everything will work out.
I love it. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Everybody, this is Dakota Gold. Ticker symbol is DC. And hopefully, Jonathan, will speak to you again soon. It's really fantastic.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.